It starts like any other day, but things take a sharp turn when a routine encounter with a police officer escalates into something completely unexpected. In this story, we meet a confident man who knows his rights and a female officer who struggles to keep her cool when challenged. What begins as a simple ID request quickly turns into a test of patience, knowledge, and composure. The officer insists on seeing identification, but the man refuses, standing firm on his legal rights. As the tension builds, their exchange becomes a fascinating display of confidence versus authority. Questions arise: who's right and who's crossing the line? It's not just about knowing the law, it's about how people handle pressure when their authority is questioned. The situation unfolds in a way you won't see coming, leaving everyone watching to wonder how it will end. Stay tuned as this intense interaction takes a surprising turn that will keep you hooked. As the officer grows more insistent, it becomes clear this isn't her first time handling someone who refuses to comply. But today feels different. The man remains calm, almost too calm, as if he's been in this situation before. He speaks with confidence, asking pointed questions about the law and his rights. The officer hesitates, her words becoming slightly unsure, but she doubles down, determined to assert control. Passers-by start to take notice, watching from a distance, unsure of what might happen next. The man, unfazed by the growing attention, holds his ground. His refusal to provide ID isn't about defiance, it's about principle. He knows the rules, maybe even better than the officer does, and it's starting to show. Meanwhile, the officer's frustration begins to bubble beneath the surface. The pressure to maintain authority, the eyes of onlookers, and the man's unwavering confidence create a mix of tension and uncertainty. With every word exchanged, the stakes seem to rise. Something has to give. But what? The officer takes a step closer, her voice firmer now, trying to regain control of the situation. She explains her reasoning, claiming it's standard procedure and for safety purposes, but the man isn't buying it. He calmly pushes back, asking her to clarify the law she's enforcing. Each time she tries to sidestep his questions, he counters with facts, leaving her visibly uncomfortable. Her authority, once unquestioned, now seems shaky under the weight of his calm and calculated responses. The onlookers begin whispering among themselves, some siding with the officer, others nodding in agreement with the man's firm stance. The situation feels like a standoff, two people locked in a quiet battle of willpower and knowledge. The man's confidence is disarming, almost unnerving, and the officer's attempts to take control seem to slip further out of reach with every passing second. Meanwhile, a few spectators pull out their phones, recording the encounter. The tension is thick, and the question lingers: how far will this go before someone backs down? The officer's frustration becomes more apparent as she shifts her stance, her tone now sharp and commanding. She reminds the man that failure to comply could lead to further consequences, but he doesn't flinch. Instead, he calmly asks again, "Am I being detained, or am I free to go?" His question seems to hang in the air, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The crowd grows, and the buzz of whispers turns into quiet anticipation. For a moment, the officer pauses, her authority visibly challenged. She reaches for her radio, calling for backup, as if the presence of another officer might shift the dynamic. But the man stands his ground, his demeanor steady, his words calculated. "I have the right to stand here, just like you do," he says, his voice steady but resolute. The atmosphere is electric, both sides waiting for the next move. The officer takes a step back, weighing her options. The crowd is silent now, phones still recording. The tension is at its peak, and it feels like something big is about to happen. Just as the officer steps back, the faint sound of another patrol car approaches, its flashing lights cutting through the growing tension. Backup has arrived, and with it, a new layer of uncertainty. A second officer steps out, his expression unreadable as he surveys the scene. The first officer quickly briefs him, her words low but firm, as if trying to regain some sense of control. Meanwhile, the man remains calm, hands by his side, watching the interaction unfold. The second officer turns to the man, his approach noticeably different. He speaks in a measured tone, asking the same question, "Can I see your ID?" But instead of escalating, he listens as the man calmly explains his stance, referencing case law and his constitutional rights. The crowd murmurs again, sensing the shift in energy. Suddenly, the first officer interjects, her frustration boiling over. "We don't have time for this," she snaps, her voice louder now. The second officer hesitates, glancing between his colleague and the man, as if caught between two opposing forces. The tension builds once more, and the situation feels like it's teetering on the edge of something big. The second officer takes a step back, clearly processing the situation. He turns to the first officer, lowering his voice, but loud enough for the man and the crowd to hear. "He's right," he says firmly. The first officer freezes, her frustration turning into disbelief. The man stays quiet, letting the moment sink in, his calm composure unshaken. The crowd, now fully invested, reacts with murmurs of surprise, some even smirking at the unexpected turn. The first officer struggles to respond, her authority slipping further away. But he refused, she protests, her voice edged with desperation. The second officer shakes his head and says, "He doesn't have to show ID unless he's being detained, and we don't have cause for that." The silence that follows is deafening. The first officer exhales sharply, clearly trying to maintain her composure, but it's evident she's been caught in a misstep. Just as the crowd begins to dissipate, the man speaks up, addressing both officers. "Knowing your rights isn't about confrontation," he says calmly. "It's about mutual respect." With that, he turns and walks away, leaving the officers standing there, one visibly humbled and the other quietly reflective. The crowd disperses and the tension dissolves, but the moment lingers, a reminder of how quickly authority and confidence can shift. As the man walks away, the crowd thins out, their whispers fading into the background. Some of them glance back at the officers, while others exchange quiet words about what they just witnessed. The first officer stands still for a moment, her expression a mix of frustration and realization. The second officer places a hand on her shoulder and quietly says, "We all have something to learn." She nods reluctantly, the tension in her face softening ever so slightly. Meanwhile, the man continues down the sidewalk, his calm demeanor unwavering. He doesn't look back, knowing he made his point without unnecessary conflict. It wasn't about winning or proving someone wrong. It was about standing up for his rights and doing so respectfully. For the crowd, it became more than just an exchange. It was a lesson in composure, knowledge, and the balance between authority and accountability. In the end, the moment leaves everyone involved with something to reflect on. It's a reminder that respect and understanding can often say more than words ever could.